Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're going to be looking at HR analytics
Okay.
and specifically the adoption of HR analytics
Right.
and kind of how it connects to HR information systems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's interesting because we keep hearing all this stuff about how powerful it is,
Yes.
but you don't really see a lot of companies using it effectively.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's a pretty big disconnect between the potential
Right.
and how much it's actually being used, you know?
Yeah, it's kind of like having a treasure map, but never actually digging for the treasure.
That's a great analogy.
And we've got this whole stack of research articles and practical guides and surveys and things like that.
Yeah.
We're going to try to figure out why people aren't, going after that treasure.
I think a good place to start would be to just define,
Yeah,
what we're talking about.
sure.
Because HR analytics has kind of evolved over time.
Yeah.
It's gone from like basic metrics like turnover to something much more.
Right. So we're not just talking about counting heads and tracking how many people quit each year.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it more like, like Netflix recommendations,
Okay.
where they use your viewing history to predict what shows you'll like.
Mm-hmm.
HR analytics can be used to predict things like which employees will thrive in certain roles,
Oh, wow.
or even who might be thinking about leaving the company.
So it's about being more proactive
Yeah.
and really spotting those trends and making smarter decisions about, your people.
Exactly. And there's this research from Marler in 2017 that really digs into how this has all evolved.
Mm-hmm.
He even talks about this framework called the LMP model,
LMP.
which stands for Logic, Analytics, Measures, and Processes.
Oh, okay.
And it's all about building a really effective system for measurement.
Yeah, I was going to say that logic part has got to be pretty key.
For sure.
It can't just be about crunching numbers. You got to connect it back to, actual business goals.
Absolutely. You need a really clear why behind any analysis you're doing.
Mm.
And I found this stat that's really interesting.
Okay.
There was a study back in 2012 by Errol,
Okay.
and they found that companies that were using both HR analytics and they had like dedicated HR management software, they actually had a 16.5% increase in sales.
Whoa, wait. 16.5% higher sales just from using better HR data.
Yeah.
That's a massive jump.
Yeah.
I bet our listeners are thinking like, how did they do that?
That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the study doesn't really get into the specifics,
Okay.
but it really makes you wonder, was it because they were making better hiring decisions?
Mm.
Or maybe they had reduced turnover costs?
Right.
Or maybe their employees were more engaged and that led to better customer service?
There's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
It really makes you realize that, this isn't just an HR thing.
Right.
This affects the whole business.
Absolutely, it's a business thing, and that's why this low adoption rate is so strange.
Yeah.
You'd think if companies knew they could boost their sales like that, they'd be all over it.
So what's holding them back then?
Well, one thing that keeps coming up in the research is this idea of a skills gap,
Oh,
like within HR departments.
yeah. Yeah.
A lot of HR professionals, maybe they're great with people,
Mm-hmm.
but they don't necessarily have a strong background in data analysis.
They're not as comfortable with the spreadsheets and all the statistics and things.
Exactly. Marler talks about this quite a bit, and it's definitely something to think about.
Because if HR can't handle the data,
Yeah.
then someone else is going to have to step in, right?
Right, and that's actually something that Angrave brought up in his research back in 2016.
Okay.
He was worried that, finance departments, because they tend to have a stronger analytical background,
Right.
might end up kind of taking over HR analytics.
And then HR kind of gets pushed to the side.
Yeah, exactly. And that would be a huge missed opportunity because HR has so much knowledge about the workforce.
Right.
They just need the skills to be able to translate that knowledge into data.
Into those insights that are data-driven.
Exactly. And, it's not just about individual skills either.
Okay.
We also need to think about the culture of the organization
Okay.
and especially, the role of leadership.
So you're talking about management buy-in.
Yeah, exactly. And this research from Coco back in 2011
Okay.
really emphasizes this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you need senior leaders who are going to really champion this data-driven approach.
Yeah.
If you don't have that support from the top,
Right.
it's really hard to get these initiatives off the ground.
It just becomes like a little passion project that doesn't really go anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But when the leadership team really embraces the data,
Yeah.
it can totally change the game.
Yeah.
Coco actually gives a great example of Lowe's.
The home improvement store.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
They really went above and beyond to build trust with their senior leadership
Okay.
and get them to buy into their HR analytics projects.
So they realized it wasn't enough to just have the data.
Right.
They needed to create a culture where everyone valued that data.
Yeah, and used it to make decisions.
Yeah. And that brings us to another really important piece of the puzzle.
Which is technology.
So the HR information systems.
Exactly, or HRIS for short.
Yeah.
Both Marler and McCarney, in their articles from 2017 and 2022,
Okay.
they both talk about how important it is to have the right technology
Makes sense.
to support your HR analytics.
Because you can have the best people in the world,
Yeah,
but if your data's a mess,
right.
if it's all over the place in different systems,
It's going to be really hard to actually use it.
then it's useless.
Yeah, you need a way to collect it and store it and analyze it and share it. And if you've got systems that are fragmented or they don't talk to each other,
Yeah.
or the software is just limited in what it can do,
Right.
that's going to hold you back.
And, I remember that stat from Errol's research.
Yeah.
Where they said there was no performance increase when companies used HR analytics without that dedicated
It
software.
goes hand in hand.
Yeah, you can't just slap on some fancy tools and expect everything to be fixed.
Exactly. You need that solid foundation.
Okay, so we've got these few challenges here. We've got the skills gap. We've got the management buy-in.
Yeah.
And then this whole technology piece.
Right.
But I have a feeling there's even more to it.
You're right. There is. And this next one might surprise you.
Okay.
It's all about social influence.
Social influence. How does that fit into this data and analytics world?
Well, there's this fascinating study by Mohammed in 2022, and they found that both peer and management support have a huge impact on whether these initiatives actually succeed.
So it's not enough to just have the right skills and the right tools.
You need to create a culture where everybody's on board.
Yeah, where everybody's using data to make decisions.
Exactly. If people see that the colleagues and their leaders are embracing this, they're much more likely to do it themselves.
So it creates this kind of ripple effect. Okay, this is starting to paint a much clearer picture of, why we aren't seeing more adoption.
Yeah.
But before we jump into what the future holds, I want to kind of bring our listeners into the conversation for a second.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, because sometimes we can get so caught up in this research that we forget there's someone on the other side of the microphone.
Yeah.
So to all of you listening, we're curious, what's resonating with you so far?
Yeah.
Do any of these challenges sound familiar, based on your own experiences?
Take a minute and think about that.
Think about it for a second before we keep going.
All right.
Okay.
It's easy to focus on all the challenges, but this is really about the future of HR. And the research is pointing towards a very data-driven future.
Makes sense. If data is going to be used for everything, then HR needs to be able to understand it and use it.
Absolutely. And just imagine HR professionals who are comfortable with spreadsheets and data analysis and even programming.
Programming. Whoa.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't some sci-fi thing.
Right.
The research suggests this is where the field is headed.
Wow. So what would that even look like? I mean, what could you do with that?
Well, think about it. You could build your own models to predict what your talent needs are going to be, or even identify people who might be at risk of leaving.
It's like having a crystal ball, but instead of magic, it's all data and algorithms.
Exactly. And it's not just about crunching numbers.
Yeah.
It's about using those insights to make better decisions about your people.
Which then leads to a better workforce.
Right. More engaged, more productive, more successful.
And ultimately, a more successful company.
Exactly.
And, I keep thinking back to that 16.5% sales increase.
Yeah.
That's a real example of how powerful this can be.
It really is. And it's not just about the numbers either.
Okay.
HR analytics can also be a powerful tool for creating a fairer workplace.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that. I mean, how can data promote diversity and inclusion?
Well, you can use it to analyze hiring patterns and see if there are any biases in your recruitment process.
Okay.
You can also look at employee demographics and identify areas where you might need to focus your D&I efforts.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So it's not just about making more money.
No.
It's about making the company a better place for everybody.
Exactly. And this is where that idea of social influence comes back in.
Right.
If you can show people the positive impact, not just on the bottom line, but on the people, you're much more likely to get everyone on board.
It's a win-win.
Exactly. And that's why we want to ask you, our listener, a question.
Okay.
If social influence is so important, how can you become an advocate for data-driven decision-making in your own organization?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Are you in a position to champion this?
Yeah.
Are you ready to embrace this and really advocate for it?
We've given you a lot to think about.
we
And
have...
so take some time to reflect on all of this
Yeah.
and think about how you can make a difference.
Yeah, because like you said, the future is data-driven. It is.
And we need people who are ready for that.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We've talked about the what and the why of HR analytics,
Yeah.
but how can our listener actually put this into practice?
Right. So it's all about taking the theory and actually doing something with it.
Okay.
So let's say you're trying to reduce employee turnover.
Okay.
Traditionally you might use exit interviews
Mm-hmm.
to try and figure out why people are leaving.
Right, but by then it's too late.
Exactly. It's like closing the barn door after the horse has already bolted.
Yeah.
You're trying to understand the problem after it's already happened.
Right.
But with HR analytics, you can be proactive.
Okay.
You can use the data to spot patterns and predict which employees might be thinking about leaving.
Before they even start looking for a new job.
Exactly. It's like an early warning system.
Okay, so what kind of data would you even use for something like that?
Well, it could be a lot of different things.
Okay.
Performance reviews, compensation data, engagement surveys.
Yeah. Okay.
Even things like how often someone logs into the company intranet.
Wait, you're telling me you can predict turnover based on how often someone checks the company news?
Well, it's not about any one data point.
Okay.
It's about looking at the whole picture,
Right.
identifying patterns,
Yeah.
and using algorithms to kind of assess the risk.
Okay, so let's say you've identified someone as a potential flight risk.
Mm-hmm.
What do you do? Then you can't just ignore it.
Right. Right. That's where you need to be able to take action.
Okay.
So you use these insights to develop specific interventions.
Okay.
Maybe you offer them some professional development opportunities or adjust their compensation
Right.
or even just have a conversation with them.
Yeah, just to see what's going on.
Exactly.
So you're using the data to make better decisions
Okay.
about how to keep your best people happy.
Exactly. And the great thing about HR analytics
Yeah.
is that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Okay.
You can tailor it to your specific organization
Right.
and your workforce.
So whether you're a tiny startup
Hmm.
or a huge company,
Yeah,
there's a way to make this work for you.
absolutely. And there are so many potential applications.
Yeah, we've talked about retention.
Right, right.
But you can also use this for recruitment,
Hmm.
performance management, talent development, succession planning.
It really touches every part of the employee life cycle.
It sounds like this is more than just a trend.
Yeah.
This is like a fundamental shift
It is.
in how we manage people.
It really is. And for our listener,
Yeah,
the key takeaway here is that the future of HR is data-driven.
it is.
And the organizations and the people who embrace this are going to be the ones who succeed.
So if you haven't started exploring HR analytics yet,
Now's
now's the time. Get on board.
Your career might depend on it.
Yeah. And who knows, you might even find out that you enjoy working with data.
It can be fun.
It's not as scary as it sounds.
Not at all.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of HR analytics.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you found it informative and inspiring.
And maybe a little bit challenging.
Yeah. Until next time.